When we think of the Vikings, what comes to mind? Magnificent longships cutting through the waves, of course. We picture fierce warriors with axes and horned helmets, though they probably didn't actually have horns on their helmets. That's another story. We imagine them raiding distant shores and exploring new lands. But have you ever stopped to wonder how they survived the brutal, biting cold of a Scandinavian winter? Their real genius wasn't just in shipbuilding or battle tactics. It was in something far more fundamental, something that allowed their communities to thrive through months of snow and ice. The incredible way they built their homes. These weren't just simple wooden huts. The Vikings were masters of using what the land gave them. Their longhouses were marvels of engineering, designed to keep a large family, and sometimes their animals, warm and safe. The secret wasn't one single material, but a clever combination of many. It was a deep understanding of insulation, ventilation, and heat. This knowledge was passed down through generations, a silent testament to their resilience. Forget the sagas of heroic battles for a moment. The true epic was the yearly struggle against the cold, and the longhouse was their fortress in that fight. The challenge they faced was immense. Imagine winters where the sun barely climbs above the horizon, where temperatures plummet far below freezing for weeks on end. Firewood would have been a precious resource, so just building a bigger fire wasn't the answer. They needed a home that could capture and hold on to every bit of warmth. This is where their ingenuity truly shines. They didn't fight the environment. They worked with it. They saw the earth, the turf, and even the snow not as obstacles, but as building materials, as allies in their quest for survival. This is what fascinates me so much, just like digging for clues on a time team site. It's about looking past the obvious and uncovering the hidden details. The Vikings' success wasn't just down to their adventurous spirit. It was built on a foundation of practical, everyday brilliance. The construction of their homes was a carefully considered process, a science of survival honed over centuries. They were not just building shelters. They were creating warm, living spaces that could withstand the very worst that nature could throw at them, a skill that is just as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. So, how did they do it? The real magic lies in the walls of their longhouses. They weren't just solid planks of wood. Instead, the Vikings built what you might call a layer cake wall. It all started with a strong timber frame, often made from sturdy oak or pine, which provided the main structure. This skeleton was the backbone of the house, but a simple wooden wall would let the cold seep right through. The Vikings knew this, so they didn't stop there. This frame was just the beginning of their clever insulation strategy, a framework for a much more complex and effective barrier against the winter chill. The next step was to fill the gaps in this timber frame. Here, they used a fantastic combination of materials straight from the local landscape. They would tightly pack in layers of turf, which is essentially blocks of earth with the grass still attached. Between these turf blocks, they would smear a thick layer of clay mixed with straw. This mixture acted like a primitive mortar, sealing any gaps and making the wall airtight. But they went even further, adding another crucial layer: moss. Dried moss was packed into any remaining crevices, acting like a natural sponge to absorb moisture and provide yet another layer of insulation. This layered approach was pure genius. Each material had a specific job to do. The wood provided the strength and structure. The dense turf blocks were brilliant at stopping the wind and providing a thick, insulating mass. The clay and straw mixture created an impermeable seal, preventing drafts from whistling through the home and chilling everyone inside. The moss was the final touch, a flexible filler that could be pushed into the tiniest of spaces, ensuring that not a single bit of precious warmth could escape. It was like they were wrapping their homes in a thick, earthy blanket. Think of it like putting on clothes for a cold day. You don't just wear one big thick coat. You wear several layers, a t-shirt, a jumper, and then a coat. Each layer traps a bit of air, and it's this trapped air that keeps you warm. The Vikings were doing exactly the same thing with their houses. The different densities of the turf, clay, and moss created pockets of trapped air within the wall. This made it incredibly difficult for the cold outside to get in, and for the heat from the hearth inside to get out. It was a simple principle, but devastatingly effective. The Vikings' cleverness didn't stop at the walls. Their roofs were just as important for keeping the longhouse warm and dry. They didn't use tiles or slate. Instead, they created a living roof. Over a base of wooden planks, they would lay sheets of birch bark. This was their waterproof membrane, expertly overlapped like modern roofing felt, to ensure that rain and melting snow couldn't drip through. The birch bark's natural oils made it incredibly water-resistant. This was a critical first line of defense, keeping the interior of the house protected from the damp, which can be just as dangerous as the cold in winter. On top of this waterproof birch bark layer, they piled on thick layers of sod, or turf, just like the kind they used in the walls. This heavy layer of earth did two things. Firstly, it held the birch bark firmly in place, even against strong winds. Secondly, and most importantly, it was a phenomenal insulator. Grass and other plants would often continue to grow on the roof, which is why we call it a living roof. When winter arrived and snow began to fall, it would settle on top of this turf. The snow itself would then become another fantastic layer of insulation, trapping the house's heat even more effectively. Down below, the floor was also carefully considered. Viking longhouses didn't have wooden floorboards like we do today. The floor was usually made of stamped earth, beaten down until it was hard and flat. This might sound cold and uncomfortable, but it was part of their heating system. The earth floor acted as a giant, low-tech storage heater. During the day, the heat from the central hearth would slowly soak into the packed earth. Then, as the fire died down at night, the floor would gradually release that stored warmth back into the room, helping to maintain a stable, comfortable temperature. The hearth itself was the heart of the home, a long rectangular fire pit that often ran down the center of the longhouse. Its placement was crucial. Being in the middle meant the heat radiated outwards, warming the entire space evenly. There was no chimney as we know it. Instead, a simple hole in the roof, often with a wooden flap or cover, would let the smoke out. This might seem primitive, but it prevented all the precious warm air from rushing out, which is exactly what a modern chimney is designed to do. They controlled ventilation carefully to keep the warmth in and the smoke out. So what can we learn from these ancient builders? It turns out, quite a lot. These Viking construction methods are not just historical curiosities. They are packed with practical lessons that are still incredibly useful today. For anyone interested in cold weather camping or building an off-grid cabin, the Viking Longhouse is a masterclass in sustainable design. The principle of using layered, natural materials for insulation is something we can easily adapt. Instead of just relying on a thin tent fabric, think about how you could use a tarp, a blanket, and even a pile of dry leaves or snow to create a multi-layered, heat-trapping shelter. The idea of the sod roof is also making a comeback in modern, eco-friendly architecture. Green roofs, as we call them now, are fantastic insulators, reducing the need for heating in winter and air conditioning in summer. They also absorb rainwater and provide a habitat for wildlife. The Vikings understood this 1,000 years ago. They knew that working with nature rather than against it was the key. They saw that a thick layer of earth on the roof was far more effective at keeping them warm than simple wooden planks could ever be. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the oldest ideas are the best. Even their ventilation strategy holds a lesson for us. We often think we need to seal our homes up tight to keep them warm. But this can lead to damp and poor air quality. The Vikings knew they needed to let smoke and moisture out without losing all their heat. Their simple, adjustable roof vents allowed for this controlled airflow. This principle of build tight, ventilate right is a cornerstone of modern energy-efficient home construction. It's about finding that perfect balance between keeping heat in and letting stale, moist air out, a balance the Vikings had clearly mastered. Ultimately, the Viking longhouse is a beautiful example of human ingenuity and resilience. It shows us that with a bit of clever thinking, it's possible to create a comfortable, warm, and sustainable home using locally sourced, natural materials. It reminds us that the most effective solutions are often the simplest ones, born from a deep understanding of the environment. The legacy of these Norse builders isn't just found in museums or archaeological sites. It lives on in the timeless principles of insulation, ventilation, and thermal mass. Powerful ideas that can help us build smarter and live more sustainably today.